There we go.
Awesome. All right. So I think the first thing that we should do is introduce ourselves, right?
Awesome.
Um, so my name's Stephen Willems. I work for Accessibility and Disability Services. I use he, him pronouns, and I'll speak towards the access and inclusion portion of this presentation and look forward to getting to know some of you today.
And my name is Kristen Pinkowski. I am in a new role here at Towson. Some of you might have known me from being in the Hill Oak Scholars Program, but I am now the Assistant Director of Inclusive Excellence in Education and Support. And so I will be talking to you a little bit about dialogue and some of the other services that our team offers.
So let's talk about goals for today. A first strategy is or first goal is developing strategies for your organization to increase accessibility and talk about what that means in various contexts. Then Kristen's going to move into, okay, so now you have access, right? But within that, we need to know and learn how to navigate discussions and dialogue, even in heated situations. Um, so those are our two main things to go through today. We only have 50 minutes, so we're trying to embed these two things so your organizations can work more cohesively amongst each other and more cohesively within TU's environment. All right. So OIE, which is our umbrella division, includes ADS, so Accessibility and Disability Services. That's my department, and we work to provide students accommodations across campus and across context. So we work in the classroom, we work with programming outside of the classroom, we work in dorms, we work in dining halls. So when it comes to access, we try to speak to various ways to allow students with disabilities or disabled students, depending on how they identify, to be able to have equitable opportunities within our campus. We also have Center for Student Diversity. Um, and then I'm going to let Kristen say this one because that is her department.
It's a mouthful too. So the Inclusive Excellence Education and Support Team, we are the educational branch of the division. So we will come in and do professional development to departments, divisions, even student groups. Especially if there might be an incident of something like a hate bias incident on campus that might not escalate to something like a Title IX office report, maybe we could come in and do some education and learning with the group around like what happened with that bias incident. And we do book clubs, so and things like that. So we're the educational branch. And we're also in the same suite as the Vice President Patricia Bradley. She gave the keynote at the beginning of the time this afternoon. And she manages these three teams and oversees just all initiatives that have to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion for the university. So what I don't know if drop a thumbs up if you knew this, but one of the current president of Towson University, President Ginsburg, one of his presidential priorities has to do with belonging. And a lot of times when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, we think about those three things as silos. But actually, if you look at this image, where they intersect is that belonging. We want students at TU and we want to provide experiences for everyone to feel like they belong here. And the way that that happens is allowing for the community to engage in everyone's full potential, where you can be creative, innovate, become resilient, thrive, and where beliefs and values are integrated. So that's where student organizations come in, right? Because there's so many different student organizations and the students that join them, that gives them that sense of belonging. And that's equity work. That's being inclusive that is providing opportunities for all students. And so you're like a crucial part of that. So that's where this work lives.
Okay. So we can't talk about belonging without talking about access. And generally speaking, when I do presentations, they go, your accessibility and disability services. Let's talk about accommodations as well. So we'll start this conversation talking about accommodations, but then I want to talk about access, inclusion, belonging, affirmation to make sure that not just students with disabilities within your organizations thrive, but all students within your organizations thrive. There's this concept, and you can give me a thumbs up if you have heard of it, universal design. Thumbs up, maybe? Anybody curb cut effect? Has anybody heard of that one? Okay. It's the idea that if we make something accessible for someone with a disability or a disabled person, then it's more accessible for everybody, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about accommodations, and then we're going to move to, okay, how can I proactively at least think about various areas of access so that people can be a valued member and contribute to your student organizations. Because as Kristen said, um, academics is one element of the student experience. And really, when you talk about belonging, you want to feel included within your peer group, right? And you all are doing that work day to day. So, next slide.
Ah,
It's okay. It's okay. Accommodations. So, an accommodation is a change to an environment or event to allow someone with a disability um, equal opportunities. So, how do we know when an accommodation is needed? And there's a few people here, right? Nine's not too many. Feel free to answer the question in the chat or come off mute if you so choose. Okay. I'm going to give people some time, but I think the reality becomes I'm going to give people a little bit more time just in case. You may be able to observe something, right? So a barrier for someone, and it may be that that's observable. However, within ADS, at least within our office statistically, yes, the only person who really knows is the person that's there. So within our office, I tell people this all the time, and I usually have this pie chart activity, but we only have 50 minutes. Um, thanks, Jenna. Um, and hold on, let me think. Grace as well. So the three top diagnoses within our office are actually non-apparent disabilities. So if someone walked into your club or event, um, you wouldn't visibly know or could not visibly tell what barriers they may be experiencing. They also may have a diagnosis and not experience barriers at all, right? Within the context of your event and or the experience that they're having. So go ahead and click on next. The best way that I can think of in terms of figuring out what accommodations your event and or club may need is having an accommodation statement for everybody. And that doesn't have to be specific to disability. That can be specific to people who may have temporary disabilities or people who may just need some additional change or flexibility to the framework that you have existing. So just think about that while you're developing your student organizations. But as far as that accommodation statement, you'll have that within a PowerPoint that we're going to send you after this. Think about putting that on things like your event flyers. Think about putting that on your student org's website to say, how can we better help you access our specific student org? And we'll talk a little bit more about other elements that we can change to make sure that we're including all students. So let's next slide then. Oh, did I have another one? I did. Oh, this is something that comes up often. So a lot of times I'll get calls from student orgs and say, I need this support with an accommodation. So we provide accommodations for students, but if you are going to provide an accommodation, let's say interpreting, um, just because it requires a budget, that would actually be student activities, or whatever office, depending on who's asking for that. But for you all specifically, student activities who would be responsible for providing that accommodation. Okay. So we know these things called accommodations, and what they really are retrofits or some changes to make things more accessible. And so accessibility is when a person with a disability or disabled person can acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability with substantially equivalent ease of use. So that is a small statement with big impact. Think about the ease of use for someone with a disability or a disabled person in terms of accessing those accommodations and having those accommodations apparent. So we're going to chat about the following areas of accessibility because they come up in student orgs often. Accessibility is not just an accommodation statement, an interpreter, and an elevator. And a lot of times people just think, let's talk about physical accessibility within an event and or in this physical space. So it actually starts with promotion. So when you talk about the things that you are promoting your club, if they aren't screen readable, people who may have visual impairments can't even get into that club. So think about the contrast that you're using within your promotional materials. Think about um, think about if things are in fact screen readable, and there is open access software that you all can use to do that. Also, things like Blackboard and a lot of the things that are used to post your materials already have accessibility ratings integrated into them. I'm happy to talk to anybody here, and I usually have Tiger Stripes programs on how to utilize those within the semester. Um, think about your venue, think about seating, um, think about the space in between seating. Think about the amount of seating. Think about your presentation itself as far as pacing, integrating things like breaks, and then other considerations. I think the big thing that I can say is accessibility touches all aspects of an organization. So from start to finish, we should be reflecting, and I'll have these questions for you all to ask yourselves, but we should be thinking prior to planning our event and or our student org. We should be aware within whatever events and or meetings are happening, and then also unpack how we can make things more accessible for students after the fact. So reflection is this process that's continuous, and it's important for everybody. In some of my presentations, I have this ice cream that drops on the ground, and it says we all drop our ice cream every now and then, right? So we all do make mistakes. Accessibility and disability services is no different. I think it was like 5 years ago, and I did not do this. Not that I don't make mistakes, I do. But we had this big giant accessibility event, right? And we had a some sort of a prize, and it was scan the red or green something to win a prize. So what might be wrong with that? If we're scanning a red or green QR, yes, absolutely. And so how can we easily navigate that or course correct?
Oops.
It's okay. A way that I think I can easily navigate that is maybe we do shapes,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe we write red and green underneath. Not that that would have been the best idea, but it is something, right? And I could have course corrected in the moment and taken a Sharpie and put in green on it. The thing is we all do make mistakes, and therefore, when I go in the moment, up, this is something that I did wrong. I can correct it in that moment. Clear labels. Absolutely, right? And so I can go in that moment, here are these corrective actions I can take. And then if I can't take corrective actions in the moment, I can at least take it back and make sure that it's not perpetuated within my student org or within my office. They're just things to consider. So now we have access, but if we have access, it doesn't necessarily mean we're being actively included. So when we're talking about including individuals across the board, we want to think of who we're inviting to the event and have we created this event with them in mind, right? Um, Go ahead and press. I think it should show up after. Let's see. So who are we reaching out to? Are we envisioning attendees of different groups and different identities? And then are we actively ensuring that a space is inviting and welcoming to people of various people with various disabilities and or identities, right? Um, One thing that I will say that again is on other presentations, I try to condense things because we only have 50 minutes today, but I think this is a pretty big one. Agendas help. Being explicit helps. So when you are saying, "Oh, I have this event," what does this event look like? Right? Is there going to be loud noise at this event? Is it what's the sensory experience going to be at this event? What time is this event going to be at? I know you'll probably put that one, right? Um, and possibly for larger presentations, things like that, having an agenda and integrating breaks so people know what's coming down the pike, um, and they can manage themselves accordingly. Even if someone's having a bad day and is tired, a break helps, right? So there's that universal design element. But agendas can be huge on those larger presentations and being explicit and allowing people to decide. Because again, maybe a rock concert's not for someone, and you're not necessarily going to make that accessible, but you can at least say, okay, cool, here's what's going to happen, and I'm giving you the choice to include yourself or not. Or maybe someone has noise canceling headphones and still wants the ambiance, right? But they know explicitly what's going to happen, so they know how to either prepare themselves or ask the questions on what they may need. I don't know what accommodations the student needs until I know what class they have, right? Until I know the environment. And so you can't expect someone to know what they need until they know what you're offering. Something to consider. And then past being inclusive and saying, okay, so go ahead. Sorry, Kristen.
Oh, I was gonna say I went to a conference this week that was like a two all-day meetings, and they gave us fidgets each day. So, especially if your student org has budget for like giveaways, it could be something like that to make things more engaging for neurodivergent folks. And also like the counseling center has fidgets that you can use as well. So I really enjoyed that part of it. I just want to that was an example of a
Which now I'm going to overtalk. I'm sorry, Kristen.
okay.
Also, I will say this. Model the behavior. Like
Hmm.
when I do presentations for people and I do presentations about access, I have alternative seating. I try to bring, I genuinely try to get people who wear suits and ties to sit down in in beanbag chairs, right? I put fidgets out. And I go, listen, take care of yourself. Take care of your sensory needs. Take care of yourself. And I sit at times. I just go, I'm gonna sit because you're gonna get the same information from me if I sit down in front of you than if I stand behind this podium and pretend I'm more important than I am, right? So just think about also modeling the behavior because a lot of times you'll put fidgets down and say, okay, y'all can have these, right? But then there's also a different additional stigma in accessing. And to reduce that stigma, if you model the behavior of, okay, I'm using this, so y'all are welcome to, it can really help. So it's something to consider. And that leads us into being affirming and welcoming others to honestly engage in the way that they want to engage, using a strengths-based model, but also acknowledging that there may be challenges and barriers and being open to course correcting accordingly. Um, Refrain from shaming or judging, and that's part of that modeling behavior. That's taking a step further and going, I'm also going to support this and encourage this through my own behavior. Um, and don't bring attention to things that may not need to have attention brought to it. Just because something is quote unquote atypical, it doesn't mean that it should be shamed and or stigmatized. Um, so if you want to learn more, we do have an allyship training. Chris will be sending that out. Additionally, um, there is the Neurodiversity Resource Fair. I've been doing this with my friend Chris from the Counseling Center. It's our fourth annual one. It is, hold on, because I have two events back to back. It is on the 10th, in the Union ballrooms from, hold on. I think it's 12 to 3. So y'all should be getting that as well. So I know that's a lot to process. We're going to take some time.
Let's see.
But does anyone have questions before we move into Kristen's um, information on dialogue and after access, this communication piece? Also, thank you, Natalie.
Good. Yeah. Well, if anything, pops up, feel free to put it in the chat. Thank you, Stephen. And we'll have our contact information up at the end. If you want to get in touch or ask us questions or get more information about the programming Stephen mentioned, and I'll have some programming that's going to be available to you as well. So, we are in interesting times, to say the least, right? There's lots going on in our country, in the world. No matter what's going on the outside, college campuses are always a place for rich, discourse and discussion. You're all emerging young adults, and it's an exciting time. Also, this is when things can get heated, right? When discussions can take left turns, people have differing opinions or emerging opinions where we change our mind a lot in our 20s. By the time when you come to Towson and when you leave, things can change. So there's lots of times where things might get heated, and Towson University has a few opportunities to learn the skills of dialogue. And so I'm going to go over some basics today. And then if you would like to learn more and to get kind of trained in these skills, we have a few opportunities for you. So if we take a look at this, this is a great graphic. If we look down at the bottom first, we see debate, we see discussion, dialogue, and freedom. Um, these are words that have actual meanings, but we might see these used interchangeably, and that's not actually correct. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between each of them and also how Towson defines some of these things. Debate is probably, I mean, I could say raise your hand if you know what debate means, but debate, we think of elected officials debating at podiums where somebody says one thing, somebody disagrees, and sometimes it, especially in the past, 10, 15 years, it can even get nasty. There can be personal attacks. And if you look at this graphic, you'll notice that the two arrows are colliding and things are exploding, right? They're not passing each other. Also, the kind of avatars of the humans are kind of angry looking. It's just basically debating. We're not coming to any common agreement. We're just saying our opinions, and that's it. Discussion is what usually happens in the classroom. So a lot of you, especially in humanities courses, will have discussion where somebody will say, "Oh, this is how I interpreted the literature." And somebody else will say, "Oh, actually, I was thinking this was the symbol." And you're like, "Okay, I understand, but I still think this way, and I'm hearing you, but um I'm going to try to convince you a little bit." It's not necessarily arguing. There might be like some contrarians trying to make points, but we're just having a discussion. Where dialogue comes in is where you make a commitment to deep listening. We call this listening to understand. And this can be very powerful in student organizations because, again, you're coming together as a group with a common interest. Does somebody have an example of what we should have asked this actually, but what student groups are represented here today for like an example? Because again, these student groups are great ways to get involved. Comics club, business law, dance. Okay, fantastic. These are really great. Um, so yay, astronomy. Okay, so the astronomy club gets together, goes up to the observatory. Maybe they are charting when constellations can be seen, maybe doing some coding for this telescope. Dance team getting together, practicing dances, looking at, new techniques. Comics. We're coming together because we like comics, right? All of those groups can pull from really diverse crowds, right? Like lots of people know how to dance. Lots of people like comics, right? And so that is where there can be some disagreements that come up. And disagreements doesn't mean that we need to you know, that we're not able to share the same space as our fellow club members, but it can be a really rich opportunity for dialogue. This graphic is a great graphic to show that dialogue is this yes and when somebody offers their opinion or usually their personal experience, like from my experience in my dance career, this is how I have, experienced relationships with my dance instructor or my understanding of this technique. And if your experience is different, that doesn't mean the other person's experience is wrong, but it's an opportunity for you to learn about somebody else. And so it's this yes and it's both are true at the same time. These arrows are equal. And when you leave the conversation, you leave knowing something more about your fellow classmate, about your fellow club member. That doesn't mean it's always easy. And that's where we can have some strategies. So and if you notice at the very top of this graphic is freedom. This is where um, this is where we say this is where the magic happens. Now, this is another way to think about these concepts. Also, you might, I don't know if anyone has been in classes where some folks might go on diatribes, right? They might say to the professor that they have a question, but really they kind of make a speech about their opinion. And it's not really debate, it's not dialogue, it's just somebody kind of like having a chance at a soliloquy, right? And so that's sort of what diatribe is. If we look at these quadrants, we'll see that debate is this two-way competitive, somebody wins at the end, right? When we see the presidential debates, we're like, so and so won the debate. Um, that's represented here in this two-way competitive quadrant. Diatribe is one way, and that person's competing with themselves. They're just ranting, right? And the point of that is to just like be heard and to be like, I'm gonna have everyone listen to me, but I don't want anybody to talk after me. It's just listen to what I have to say. Discourse is I think a word people throw out there. It is cooperative, but it really is just one way. There's a clear objective. It's like we're gonna have discourse about this and treat it as fact. We're not really digging into it. We're just delivering information. Where dialogue comes in, again, it's two-way, it's cooperative, and it's a way to exchange information to build those connections. And so in your clubs and in your organizations, there are so many ways to build relationships in this way. Now, another way to look at this information. Oh, let's see. Ooh, I just want to look at Grace's comment. Every week, my club has a discussion about case of legal news. At our last meeting, two faculty advisors got in a very heated debate and started yelling at each other. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And in the legal world, this could make sense, although I would offer that I think in the legal world, we need more dialogue, and more listening to understand because honestly, yelling at each other isn't really, we don't want to do that.
Well, and I'll speak to that to a degree
Yeah, please.
in that when you have heated emotions and when you're not having supportive dialogue, and there are different ways to communicate. So you also need to value the ways that people communicate. A lot of times, depending on who you are, people can info dump, right? And that's a valid technique for someone to share their interests. But if you're going yes, and on the other end of that spectrum, you're valuing that and then allowing someone access to the conversation that now you've both created. And so, and I get into this later on, I think, not within just within my sidebar comments, but I'll get into this now. There is something to be said for when you think about accessibility, you think about, I don't know, physical accessibility. You think about tech and technology is a huge thing now, like accessibility within technology. But a lot of times people don't think about emotional accessibility. And so when to your point, you have two people who have this heated discussion within your group, you're closing off emotional accessibility for yourself and others, and you're carrying that, right? And so, this is why Kristen's information is so important as far as access and as far as making sure that things like that don't perpetuate themselves. And I'm sorry in terms of the power dynamic that was likely there as well.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of how you felt about that specific situation. So my thought would be following up with Chris in terms of if that's of concern, in terms of trying to make sure that your student org remains accessible, but also remains respectful because that's part of access within your student and club members. And I'm sorry I didn't catch that, Kristen. I know that I was supposed to monitor the chat.
Oh, good.
Go ahead.
So, we don't achieve this like freedom peak where it's like kumbaya. We don't achieve that overnight. If you look at this graphic on the screen of these stages of group dynamics, it's a process, right? So during the new semester, your organization is going to club to come together, meet one another, some returning members, members. As you grow, there's going to be struggle, there's going to be disagreements, and that's totally normal, but it's how we work through it. Um, if we work through it through some common language and common understanding, that's that norming stage where everyone feels welcome, everyone feels that sense of belonging, and then you actually can perform. You can have that dance recital. You can have thoughtful debates in the law club. I think law is where debates happen, but not where maybe where we're yelling. And then you're able to achieve what you want to achieve. You're able to accomplish the objectives and adjourn the semester, like say, hey, we worked through it. So this is just to say it's not like perfect overnight. We learn about each other, challenge one another, work with one another, and then we work as one together. Now, we dialogue is a skill.
Yep, I think we accidentally popped off the screen. Um, so give me 1 second and let me see if we can get her back on the screen. It's okay, Natalie. We're going to try to figure this out. All right. I WebExed and we're coming back. So do not worry. In terms of dialogue being a skill and in terms of these communication strategies, it also goes back to just being reflective. And I don't know if we're going to go into this or not, but just because you have dialogue in some contexts, it doesn't mean you at times won't have people or yourself revert back to more of a debate pattern. And so having awareness within the conversations that you're having does take work. It is um, it can be difficult, but that work is well worth it for the outcomes in which Kristen is going to review. Don't worry, Kristen, I didn't do anything horrible. We're working together on this one.
Thanks
Uh,
for your patience, friends. Look, my computer died.
it's okay. It still says recording, so I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I was getting into how dialogue is a skill. I'm gonna go briefly through this because we have a few opportunities for all of you to engage in these skills. We have, and Vice President Bradley alluded to them in her keynote earlier this afternoon. Um, we have a fellowship program that you can be nominated for and apply for to become a dialogue fellow, where you learn these skills and you become a student leader. We have an online module system called Perspectives or Campus Dialogue Initiative. And you're going to receive follow-up information about that. It's where you log in, you complete the modules, and you gain the understanding of these skills and some common language. And Brian Hara and I are going to be working with student activities to look at incentives. It might be Tiger Stripes, it might be something else for you and the rest of your club to complete the dialogue training. So, but if we look at this chart, dialogue is a skill. It's collaborative, it builds understanding, it explores identity. Um, in dialogue, we need to recognize that we show up as our authentic selves. And so that could be when I show up to dialogue, I'm a white woman, right? I have a chronic illness. That's part of my identity. Other folks might have other sorts of disabilities. Um, Sexuality might be a large part of your identity, race, gender. We show up as our true selves. We suspend judgment and we listen to understand. And the emotions that we feel that Stephen was talking about earlier, that helps deepen our understanding. We don't shy away from shedding a tear and things like that. And our goal is to find common ground and eventually lead to action. If we look at debate and discussion, debate is oppositional. The goal is to win. In a discussion, discussion's great, right? Class discussions, again, about literature, about history. You're like building community. You're saying, okay, we're all equals. And the goal is to hear everybody out, but not necessarily um have that deepened understanding. Now, This is really, if you take away one thing from my dialogue portion, this is the crux. In order to put this into practice, you need to lay ground rules, intentions, um, and you practice, more reflection, and you repeat. Um, and the reason why you have to practice over and over again is because oftentimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we don't mean to do something. We don't mean to run somebody over, but we do. Right? And that hurts. Even if you didn't, if this person in this graphic didn't intend to run over the other person's foot, it happened. And so that's why understanding when hurt is done and trying to rectify that. This is another way to think about impact versus intent. And sorry, just a little quickly going through that. We'll be able to send you that graphic because it's a good one.
I was gonna say impact versus intent in terms of accessibility. Um, it's often seen, let me help someone who is disabled or has a disability before they ask or before you've identified that they actually need help, right? So your intent is good as far as I want to help, but your assumptions get in the way of your outcome. And so your impact is negative. So it goes back to what Kristen said about suspending judgment to a larger degree and having an awareness and tapping in emotionally to the situation. So sorry, continue.
And the way, no, that's a great example, Stephen. And the way we navigate this, the way we are able to kind of set the stage is by having ground rules, norms, agreements. So what we encourage you to do in your student groups, and this is what our offices can help with, especially the education team, is when you start your new semester, you can create an agreement among your group members. And you can take into consideration all of these elements, right? Um, Using I statements, setting intentions, refraining from shaming. You want to get together your group and say, what are our rules, right? What do we need to be successful for this year to make sure everyone is heard, and everyone is listened to, and then everyone can show up as their authentic self? Then you turn those into norms. So these are some examples of norms that we have found successful when doing dialogue, but your group could create your own. And when we get together to have these tough conversations, we say, take care of yourself, be open, make room for others, maintain confidentiality. If you're talking about something that could get deep and folks are being vulnerable, we don't want to share out what they have shared. So we say what is said here stays here, but what is learned here leaves here. We want the lessons to go out into the world, but not necessarily those personal elements. Um, Practicing grace, we're all in process, nobody's perfect, and laughing and having fun. Then these are some resources that will be helpful for you all to kind of look over as you have conversations with your group. So you want to ask good questions and not just big why, big why questions that are open-ended and could lead to judgment, but you want your questions to have impact. So this is a good chart when thinking of questions. You never really want to go to yes, no questions because that's boring. Think about if you were on a date or on a friendship outing and you're getting to know somebody. Asking yes, no questions is going to be very boring and just kind of lead to an awkward lull. Whereas open-ended, saying using what is great. Except we don't want to do leading questions because we want again to meet people where they're at. We don't necessarily want to lead them to where we are.
So I also want to say in terms
Yeah,
of
please.
questions, refrain from compound questions.
Yes.
So saying, how do you feel? And also, what next activity are we going to do? Well, now you're asking someone two questions, and that can be overwhelming and overstimulating to anybody, right? And you're not going to get the depth and detail. I'll also say open-ended questions are great, but if you go too open-ended, or if someone is struggling, it's okay to ask a yes or no question that may be easily processed. So depending on your intent and depending on where you are within that situation, you should very much evaluate. But the big thing that I wanted to say was compound questions can lead to negative outcomes. So being clear, concise, and asking one question at a time can do wonders for your organization.
This is another way to look at different ways of asking questions. Um, and again, we'll have this available to you. So you can have some thoughtful conversations. Now we have additional resources, especially because we're coming up on time. We are able, our offices and the Center for Student Diversity can host various workshops that you can sign up for, and our education team can come in and do a session for you as well. And this is so you can be more inclusive. We can do dialogue skill building with you and learn how to be more accessible. So there's a link here that you'll be able to use when you get sent the slides. And Stephen and I, this is our contact information. In addition, be on the lookout for the dialogue skills training modules that are going to come out, and as well as the incentives for your student group. This is a campus-wide initiative where our goal is to get like 100% of everyone on the campus to participate in these modules. So we have those common understandings, so everyone will know what dialogue is. So,
We've hit four, but also very quickly, Neurodiversity Resource Fair is on the 10th. Kristen's office is going to be there. So in
yes.
terms of getting additional information and things that may help your student orgs, Tiger Stripes is great. You can get some money for your student orgs while learning some stuff and hopefully laughing a little. So hopefully we see you there and see you at our respective events for sure.
Yeah. And if you come say hi and then we can talk more and answer your questions there too.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We really appreciate y'all selecting us over all the other options y'all had.
Excellent,
I
Grace.
appreciate it, Grace.
You're welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Jenna.
Stay warm.
All right. I think we can stop record. I don't know how you're going to do it, or do I have to do it?
No, I'm trying. Okay, stop.
You can do it. You can do it.